You're listening to the Kitchen Garden Magazine podcast, your fortnightly fix of gardening features, advice and chat. Subscribe and follow us now to never miss an episode.
So hi folks, and welcome to the latest edition of the Kitchen Garden podcast. And I'm here as usual with the team, with Emma and Tony.
Hiya.
Hiya, how you guys? But we're delighted to have with us as well Martin Fish, who regular readers of Kitchen Garden Magazine will know as one of our regular writers. Martin's always there writing about veg, and you've written, I think, Martin, you've written our Jobs for the Month column. What haven't you written? I think you've written everything in the magazine.
More or less, because I have, because I think I first started writing for Kitchen Garden back at, I think it was about 2000 and, would it be 7, 8? No. Not long after you... And did some seed trials or something, I'm sure, and then stopped for a while and then started again about 10 years ago. So now I seem to have done all sorts, projects and garden visits, greenhouse and the lot. Yes.
You're making me feel
now
very
I've done
old.
them all. Now I've done them all. Does that mean you're going to kick me out?
We'll see how you perform today.
This is your exit interview.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Lovely. The golden handshake.
Gardening is cyclical, isn't it? So we just keep going round and round.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So you're safe, Martin. In that case, we'll just start again.
Thank goodness for that.
Where we left
we'll
off
continue.
in 2009 or whatever it was. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, no, Martin, what I'd like to know then is, when did you go straight into horticulture at 16? Is that when you started?
Yes, it is, Tony. I grew up in Nottinghamshire in the mining villages, and my dad's family were all coal miners. My dad hadn't been a miner for a number of years. My granddad died at the pit. It was not an accident. He had a heart attack and died at the pit when he was in his 50s. So at that point, my dad came out. But my brother was a coal miner, and all my uncles were coal miners. And the same, my dad had 10 years down the pit as well. And I never wanted to do that. At 15, all the boys at school were taken down the village pit on a trip, and you were taken down, down the shaft out to the coal face. It was really exciting, really. And then afterwards, you were offered a job there and then to start at the pit when you left school, when you were 16. But I'd already decided I didn't want to do that, to be fair. I was going to become, actually going to be an engineer. My dad had got into engineering and got his own little business. And that was the plan. I was going to leave school, sort of do my apprenticeship and then work with my dad. And I don't know what, I think I'd be probably 13, 14. I got the gardening bug, really with my grandma. She had a big garden, sort of very old fashioned cottage garden. She never bought anything. It was all seeds she borrowed or pinched off people or saved her own and cuttings. A lovely garden. And I had an uncle who was a coal miner. His hobby was allotments. He had 4 allotments. So when he wasn't either down the pit or in the village pub, he was on the allotment. And he entered local shows and things. So I spent quite a lot of time between them. And that's, I think, when I really got to like gardening. And I can't remember having a light bulb moment where I suddenly thought, I don't want to be an engineer, I'll be a gardener. But it was around that age, and mum and dad were very encouraging for me to do that. So, I left school at 16 and did my apprenticeship on a parks department, did my day release at college, as you used to do in those days, and my 3-year apprenticeship, and then went to full-time college after that down in Surrey. That's how it all started. And I think it's worked out for the best, to be fair, because if I had have gone into engineering, I don't think I'd have been any good. And, I'm getting on now. I mean, I've worked in horticulture for nearly 46 years. If I get a spanner and put it on a nut, I still have to think, is it clockwise or anti-clockwise? So I wouldn't have made a natural engineer. I think gardening was the best choice for me.
Oh, I don't know, because you're a dab hand at DIY. I've seen you making things in all your gardens ever since we've known you. I think Emma and I first met you in your Nottinghamshire garden that you were putting together at the time, and that was great. It was really beautiful.
Well, yes, it was. I mean, that we had a nursery, and we had big plot on 6 acres, and we sort of gradually wound the nursery down a bit. And when I started writing for magazines in 1993 is when I started. A lot happened in 1993. I started writing for a weekly gardening publication, and I started doing local radio on the BBC, on BBC Nottingham. So in 93, things changed really in my direction slightly. We still had the nursery, but you were working for the magazine that I was working for, and you used to come out on a regular basis. You were my
Should we say the name? I don't know if we should.
Well, I'm not allowed to, am I? But you,
It was Garden News.
It was Garden News, yes, yeah. And I still write for them. I don't do weekly now. I've sort of cut it down a bit. But no, that's how it sort of started, and that led then on to writing for, I used to do stuff for Gardeners World magazine, The Garden, and there was one called BBC Easy Gardening, which is now
You can
gone.
stop now, Martin. You can stop with the name checks.
But
now.
my favourite, of course, is Kitchen Garden.
Oh, of course. Oh, well, that's all right then. So writing was sort of came along by accident, or did you just?
Yeah, it was really. I like doing different things. And we'd got the nursery, and I'd buy magazines and listen to the radio, gardening on the radio. So I actually wrote pretty much at the same time to the editor of Garden News and one of the editors at the BBC in Nottingham, just saying, I'm a horticulturist. We're developing some gardens, but we've got a nursery. Any chance of some writing or broadcasting? And I got a letter back saying, yes, would you write a feature for us on, it was actually on testing the soil, the pH of the soil to see if it's acidic or alkaline. And they were very, and this was in the days before I even had there was computer, it was all typed on a typewriter. So it was so slow because you'd make a mistake or two and you'd take it out and throw it off, throw it away in the bin and start again. And I sent this feature in, and they basically said on the letter, because it was all done by letters, no emails then, if we like it, we'll publish it. If we don't, thank you, but basically don't come knocking on the door again type of thing. And they published it. And what was the really surprising thing, because we never ever talked about money or anything, about a fortnight later, I got a check in the post. And I thought, well, this is something I could work on. This is, I didn't realize I was going to get paid. I was very young and naive in those days. So yeah, so it was quite interesting how it all developed. Really, just one of those things that they could have easily written back and said we don't need any more writers, and that would have been it. I probably wouldn't have bothered. But once I'd got the book, then I do enjoy the writing. I really do, because I find it a good way of passing on experience. I'm not I could never write a novel. I'm not a good enough writer of English for that. But I find that I think I describe my style as I write as I talk. So if you were asking me how to do a job in the garden, I would be writing that down exactly as I'm speaking to you. And that's sort of the style I've got. And it means I can pass on my years of experience, whether it's good or bad, I can pass it on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So was running a nursery, that must have been full on, was it?
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean, because I trained on a parks, but a lot of it was in the nursery. But when I did college, I did nursery practices, so all sorts, and that included some fruit and veg production as well, but a lot of ornamentals. So my dream was, I was a head gardener, but my dream was to have a little nursery, and I found a piece of land, cheapest we could get, because as a head gardener, I was earning not a lot. And built it up from there. Bought second-hand glass houses, second-hand polytunnels, and we did okay. We never got rich doing it, but I was very fortunate that we were a very traditional mixed nursery. So we were growing, a few herbaceous, we were growing bedding plants, we were growing seasonal veg plants, tomatoes, and all the brassicas and cucumbers for spring, a few trees and shrubs, and we used to graft fruit trees as well. So a bit of everything. But I suppose what was good for us at the parks department that I originally worked for had sold off their nursery site, and they were looking for somebody to grow their bedding for them. So I fortunately got the contract, and that really allowed us to develop the nursery. But yes, it was full on, because I was trying to do a bit of writing, I was trying to do a bit of radio. I was also teaching part-time at the local agricultural college. I was teaching horticulture for 9 years, and that was really just to bring a bit of extra cash in. to finance the nursery to get it going. So yes, it was lots of long days, and we were open to the public, so 7 days a week for quite a few years. But I loved it. I don't consider a lot of what I do to be work, really. I thoroughly enjoy it. So which you don't mind putting the time in if that's the case.
And did you, in your Nottinghamshire garden, did you open that to the public? You used to have people in and give talks and that?
Yes, we did. Yeah, when we'd still got the nursery, but we were sort of scaling the nursery down a bit, and we would have WIs in and gardening clubs and ladies groups. We do talks and tours of the garden. In fact, we did sort of some biggish open days. I remember we did something for the BBC one year for children in need with Pudsey Bear and things like that. So, we used to use the garden. The garden became part of the business, really. And after we had a bad flood in 2000, really bad flood. We had sort of 3 feet of water through the nursery, and that made us rethink because we lost all our stock of plants. It was the end. It was November. All the stock, shrubs and everything were just carried away in 3 feet of water. So we'd either got to borrow a load of money to restock the nursery ready for the spring, or we could diversify. So that was the point when Jill and I thought, well, we've started to do some gardens, which you were involved with, Steve. Let's build on that. And we did more. And then we opened it up to groups, and we did filming for various companies. If they'd got sheds they wanted to put in a garden to photograph or film, they could hire the facility. So that's the way we went from 2000 onwards until we moved. We left in 2009. Right,
yeah. And then you went on to North Yorkshire?
Yes, we went from Nottinghamshire up to North Yorkshire. A new challenge, really. I was involved a little bit with the Harrogate flower shows. They'd asked me to be their honorary president, which I was for 3 years from 2006. But then they asked me if I would take on the role as show director. The show director they had was retiring, and they wanted somebody else, but they wanted somebody with more of a horticultural background, which the previous director hadn't. He was very good at his job, but he hadn't got a horticultural background. So they wanted to inject a bit more horticulture into the shows and different ideas. So we moved, I think it was 2009, and I started the job in 2008 in the autumn. So it meant moving, really, because it was too far to commute. And as I said, I like different projects and different challenges. So I kept on most of my writing, probably all the writing at the time, and the radio, because you can do the writing of an evening. And I carried on doing Radio Nottingham from Yorkshire, and then ran the flower shows for 5 years. So the 2 shows, the spring and the autumn show, and left in the end of 2013. So I did 10 shows, and I love this. Still very much involved with shows, but all over the country, really. But it was very much an office job. I was office bound Monday to Friday, and I'd never been in that situation. And I must admit, I was finding it a bit difficult. I was missing getting my hands in the soil. So I left. I'm still involved. I work with the new director who I employed. I organise judging and do talks and things for them. But I went back to basically picking up where we were. And by then we were developing a new garden in North Yorkshire, which we did for the next 10 years, opened for groups and WIs and all sorts of things, but on a smaller scale. It was a smaller garden.
Yeah. We briefly mentioned Jill. We ought to mention, we'll get into trouble if we don't mention her a little more, because you're quite a team. And I know in certainly the garden in Yorkshire, when you gave talks, Jill was there with you. She helps you with talks at shows and things now, doesn't she?
Yes, she does. Yeah, Jill originally was a school teacher.
I should mention your book, excellent book as well.
Oh, right. Oh, yes.
On the camera, but
thank you.
Jill supplies some recipes.
We are looking, because we've had 2 prints, and we're looking to get another print because we're getting very low on it, and we still sell them at shows. So we are looking to get some more. But yes, Jill was originally a school teacher, and then obviously when she met me and married me, she sort of got into the gardening a bit more, and it got to the point when it was probably, I'm trying to think, it was probably when we still had the nursery. It was before we sort of diversified. I I needed some extra help. I was going to have to employ somebody by that point to do sort of the office work and generally organise me. I'm not the most organised of people. I know I look like I am, Steve, but I'm not. I have to have somebody pushing me at times, like little emails saying, don't forget your copy marking and that type of thing. And so, well, only now and again. I'm getting better because I've got Jill prodding me with a pitchfork. And Jill said, well, you know, I'm happy to give up my career because I want to work with you on the nursery. So Jill stopped teaching, came to work with me, and as we worked together ever since. And lots of people say, you know, how do you work with your wife all the time? But we love it. We really do genuinely enjoy working together. So yes, Jill, you know, would do talks, and she would do all the catering for when we had groups. And when we were doing television, we had quite a bit of television from the old garden in Nottinghamshire. She did all the catering. So it developed from there. And it was, again, working with Kitchen Garden that she was offered the job of a cookery writer. And I don't know whether you were still there then, Steve, or after you'd gone, but she did 5 years doing the cookery writing. And then that led on to us doing talks together. And then the book came along. And what we do now is we work at lots of shows through the year. I think we've got probably 12 booked for this coming season. So Jill comes with me to the shows. I do the gardening talks, and Jill, we do a joint one called Gardening on the Menu. And I talk about what veg is in season at the time. And then Jill will be cooking on stage a lovely recipe and showing you how you can use your homegrown fresh produce. So she's in the planning stage at the moment, deciding what to cook for the shows this year. So, and the exhibitors love it because we're usually in the floral marquee, and they love it because since COVID, it's difficult to give the samples away, you know, health and safety and all of this type of thing. So we often don't give the samples to the public, but we're allowed to poison the exhibitors. So they come backstage and eat it. So, you know, they form a queue, an orderly queue. So it's good fun, and we do enjoy working together. But she's a very good gardener as well. Jill is, you know, she's had to be, because having big gardens, she's been doing lots of the maintenance. So she's a good all-rounder.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned shows. You're a show judge as well for the RHS. That must be interesting and challenging.
Yeah.
At times.
Yes, it is. And I really enjoy it. I mean, I did it before I worked for Harrogate and sort of local shows as well. And did some with the RHS sort of about 2006 to 2008. But then I stopped doing that when I worked for Harrogate. It would have been difficult to get the time off to do it, to be fair. But then when I left Harrogate, they approached me again, and I started doing more judging with them. And yeah, no, I'm officially called a senior judge, and I'm not sure whether that refers to my age or the fact that I've been doing it for a number of years. I'm not asked. So as a senior judge, we judge. There's sort of a handful of us, probably 6 of us, that judge at all the RHS shows, and we either chair a judging panel, or we do a process called moderation, where you've got the judges and the panels going around, but you have moderators that sort of oversee it, and it's to make sure that all the judging is done fairly within the panels and at the same level. So yeah, no, I love it. So yes, I mean, there aren't as many RHS shows as there used to be because Chatswood's gone, Cardiff's gone, but I do Chelsea and Hampton and Tatton and the Malverns for the RHS, and then some of the garden shows at Hyde Hall and Harlow Carr. So I do enjoy the judging. I mean, all that work is all voluntary, of course, but I just love being at the shows. And it links in with the work because I do some committee work for the RHS as well. So it all sort of links nicely together.
Yeah.
Martin, you said that you're coming up to, did you say 46 years in the business?
Yes.
So what are the biggest changes do you think you've seen since you started?
Well, 46 years. I told you I left school at 16. I was actually only 6 when I left school. If people were trying to work it out. The changes, there have been changes. I think the style of gardening has changed somewhat. You know, I was sort of taught by people when I was an apprentice, some of the older gardeners. I mean, this was in the late 70s, and some of them had been working, were old enough to have worked on the private estates. And then as the private estates all closed, a lot of the the gardeners and the head gardeners on the private estates, sort of after the war, went to work for local authorities on parks departments in the heyday of the parks department. So they'd had that really strict, thorough training, which some of it sort of passed on to me as an apprentice. I think that's all changed now. Gardening techniques have certainly changed. I think the style, people often garden, they don't want the garden to be as neat and tidy. The thing, and I have mixed thoughts on that. I think you can still have a very neat and tidy garden, but still cater for wildlife. By not cutting things down, but you can still trim your edges and, control some of the weeds and that type of thing. So I think that's one of the main things. I think certainly there's been the big boom in resurgence in allotments, which I think is fantastic. They over the last 10 years, they've just got so popular. I remember sort of the days when you'd see loads of overgrown allotments because people didn't want them, and then it's now completely the opposite. They've all got big waiting lists. So that is amazing to see that happening. And I think the plants we grow, we grow a wider range of plants. I think people are a bit more adventurous, and certainly the seed catalogues and the nurseries have a much broader range of plants that we can grow. So yes, it has changed, but I suppose, from people going back 50 years before me would probably said the same, wouldn't they? Things change and evolve. Yeah. I think, I remember the good old days, but were they really good old days? I don't know.
So are you a digger, or a no digger?
I am still a digger, but I'm not a deep digger. I mean, we're very fortunate in the fact that the new beds we've built here have got lovely soil in, and the soil we had up in North Yorkshire was lovely soil. So I didn't really need to put a spade into it much. I'm a tickler. In the spring, I would, get the compost on it and tickle it with a fork, and that needed to be it. But I can't strictly say I'm a no dig. I have tried it. I did actually try it. We actually did trials. It's not new in a way, because I remember as a college student, we had trial plots, and we used to do various things. You'd dig them, you'd double dig them. We did some where you just left them, you put some with manure on, and all these different plots, and grew in them, and at the end of the year compared. So we were sort of experimenting with it then. But when we lived in Nottinghamshire, we had really sticky clay. And I did a phase of having a go at it. And I must admit, I didn't get particularly good results. And I know some of the experts will say, well, it works really well on clay soil, but our clay you could have made bricks with. So we had that lovely layer of compost on, but the roots, anything with a root crop just would not go down into it. So I for that reason, then I did have to dig that a little bit more. But over the years, I'm a great believer in putting plenty of organic matter on whatever your soil. And I think if you get it into that condition over time where you put loads of compost or manure on, if you're lucky enough to be able to get it, your soil doesn't then need to be dug with a trench every year. You can just sort of tickle it and loosen it up a little bit, and away you go. I'm more into, as well, I do believe in rotation. I very much believe in rotation. So I do have my different plots, so where they, move around. So, if you've got problems with carrot root fly, you're not coming back to that plot for 3 or 4 years. So it's going to hopefully help to get rid of some of the pests or the diseases in there. But I'm not a no digger. I would call myself minimal cultivation. So I'm doing a bit of cultivating, but shallow, and putting loads of compost on.
Right. Very interesting. Yeah. I mean, we should explain.
So what about you, though? Are you all? Go on, I'm going to turn the tails. What about Emma? Are you an OD?
Well, I've taken on a new plot. So, and literally it was absolutely got loads of nettles growing on top of nettles. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to just stick a bit of cardboard down, I think, and put a bit of compost on top. I think I'm going to have to dig this first. So I'm afraid, for this first year, I have gone through it all, digging really deeply and getting every root out I can. But I probably will do a bit no dig eventually moving forward. I think it would be not no dig, but I'm a bit like you, I think, probably very similar actually. Just like yeah.
What about you then, Steve?
Well, I've tried both, and I mean, it's all right in certain situations. So where you got raised beds, it's fine, isn't it? I think you can put a little bit of compost on the top. But my daughter's just hoping to take on an allotment in Nottingham, and that's in a bit of a state. And I'm thinking, and she's very much into no dig. That's what she wants to do. And I'm thinking, where's she going to get all the compost? You know, she get plenty of cardboard to lay down to make the beds, and then you put the compost on top, don't you? And the idea is that the cardboard rots and you can plant through, which is fine, and it may well work, but there's lots of big perennial weeds in there, and she's got no compost. So I think she's going to have to dig to start, at least, as Emma says, you have to start it off. You're going to have to dig, really, to make any kind of impression. But
I think what Steve's trying to say, Martin, is if you're ever over Nottingham Way, just pop down to see Kate.
Yeah, we'll do. Yeah. I've not seen Katie for a while, so that'd be good.
With a barrel load of manure.
Yeah,
if possible.
Yeah. I can try my best.
Sorry,
I was going to say that's a good. Yeah, well, you have exactly. I might come and visit you, Emma. Yes, bring the trailer up to visit you. I mean, it's interesting. I saw something on. I can't remember what social media platform it was. It was a little video where somebody was creating beds. And I don't even know the name of the lady, but she's obviously got a big following. And she was exactly doing the same. She was putting down the cardboard on weeds, which some of the annuals. I'm still a great believer. I think perennials will come through, although some people say they don't. But by the way they grow, I'm sure they will. But then she was covering it over with 3 or 4 inches of compost to plant into, but the compost she was putting on was a very well-known and expensive brand of multi-purpose compost. It was a peat-free compost that you would use for planting your containers and growing your plants in. And she probably had 20 bags of this. I wouldn't be able to afford to do it for a start, because this compost retails at about 9 or 10 quid a bag anyway. So I thought, not only are your vegetables going to cost a fortune, but environmentally, that isn't good, because the compost has got quite a big carbon footprint. It's, made from bark that's probably imported. And I just think, that isn't an environmental way of gardening. So I think sometimes some of the things we see that on social media, they might look good, but they're not particularly effective, cost effective, or good for the environment. So I like to think the way I do it, I make all my own garden compost. I have had to buy some in, get some in for the new garden to get us going. But from now on, it will all be made in the compost bin, and that will go on the garden. That's it.
Yeah. Well, we're getting towards time. Time's nearly up. I can't believe it. It's Martin. He just keeps talking, and before you know it. But I just wanted to mention, you've as well as everything else, Martin, you've got a new podcast, I understand.
Yes, I have.
Tell us about that.
Well, the Pots and Trowels podcast, we started it in November time. So Jill's involved, and Sean is a guy I work with. I used to work with him at the BBC. So Sean and we do a video as well, a Pots and Trowels video that we've been doing weekly for the last 4 or 5 years, since before lockdown. So we were doing the weekly videos, but because I've been doing the radio for so long, and podcasts seem to be the thing, we thought, let's do a podcast. So we launched it in November, so it's still relatively new. And the idea is every week we get a guest, an eminent horticulturist. I mean, you've been on it, Steve. And
Steve, yeah.
And then I answer a few questions, we give a few jobs. So it's very much sort of magazine-y format, just, about 30, 40 minutes maximum once a week. And what I will do is, when I go to the shows in the summer, I can then speak to some of the specialist nursery exhibitors there, and visit gardens as well. So it's a bit more difficult in the winter, but come spring, when the gardens are all open, we can get out and do the interview from there. So yeah, so far, touch wood, it's going okay. And it's available on, I didn't know what podcasts were, but it's available on all the podcast providers. So if anybody knows about the podcast, look for Pots and Trowels. We put it out every Sunday morning. And the plan is to carry on right through. We're not going to do seasons or series. We're just going to plough on and keep doing it weekly.
Yeah. Well, I can recommend it. I've listened to it. I haven't actually listened to my own one because I can never
They were
bear
good.
to do that.
They were good ones, Steve. Yeah.
Some lovely ones from gardens that you did last year, and fascinating. So yeah, I can certainly recommend that. Oh,
Thank
well,
you.
thanks for joining us, Martin. We could go on for hours, couldn't we? Really, because it's just great to talk to you. It's just lovely.
No, thank you. That's good. No, anytime, one of the lovely things about my job is quite a lot that I get paid to talk. So you can't go wrong, can you, really?
Oh, and I should say that, of course, Martin started a new garden in Lincolnshire this time. And it's the basis of your features this year in Kitchen Garden magazine. So if readers want to know more about the garden and the techniques you're using, raised beds, I think you're planting fruit in there as well, Martin, because you had a lovely collection of Nottinghamshire apples in your Nottinghamshire garden. So I don't know if you're planting fruit.
Yeah, there's going to be fruit. It's a much smaller garden because the ground conditions were horrible below it. We've gone for raised beds, and it's in a very visible place. So we want it to be ornamental as well. So it will include fruit and veg, trained fruit as well, but also some flowers in there to get colour and herbs. So we want it to be quite a nice, attractive little garden. So yes, so it's all happening in there now, and looking forward to seeing it develop.
Yeah, well, as I say, readers up at Kitchen Garden will be able to see it through the season, right from what we've just in the latest magazine. You're literally taking the turf off, and right the way through to when you're harvesting later in the year. So watch out for that. So thanks, guys. It's been lovely talking to you. Lovely talking to you, Martin. And we must do this again soon.
We must do. Thank you. Bye.
Until then, thanks everyone for listening. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
If you've enjoyed this video, press the like button, and also give us a comment to let us know what you're doing in the garden at the moment. And if you like our videos generally, it'd be really great if you'd subscribe to our YouTube channel.